Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. And each week, we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry, and today we are lucky enough to be joined by Jake Goldman, founder of 10up and partner at 10up Plus Fueled. Hello, Jake. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, glad to be with you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know you're a busy guy. For those who don't know you, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and the company that you work at?
I today work at a company that we call 10up Plus Fueled, which is a bit of a holding name for two companies. The company that I founded, 10up, which is a business I built to be really focused on CMS, website development, platforms that are open source like WordPress, out in React and other major platforms, more on the web technology space, and a company called Fuel that traditionally has been an app and strategy space. The short version is, to save your listeners, is these two companies merged together, came from a financial point of view a little under a year ago now, back last September in 2023. And as we're coming closer together and going to share a unified brand, it sort of leaves me in a funny place describing what exactly my company is. 10up is still a thing. It is still presents itself as an independent entity. That's the company I founded. In the context of that company, I was the president. I was the founder. Spent a lot of time in business development. I come from an engineering background personally and a UX and UI design background personally. So I spent a lot of my time in sort of the commercial, I think you would call it, kind of the business. How do we, what's the strategy to win new customers? Who are our partners? How do we actually execute delivery strategy, providing professional services in that space? Today, a lot of my time is also spent working with my new partners at Fuel, trying to make this, succeeding and making this one business, creating a unified, integrated experience. So in the context of that combined company, I'm a partner. I'm one of the most senior members of the team. I actively chose to shed the most senior executive kind of like president title. But I'd say very much to that title, a partner focused on strategy to the top of the business.
What inspired you to actually start 10up?
So a number of things inspired me. So the first thing to say is I think I had always known that I wanted to start a business at some point. So just personal motivation was at some point wanting to be an entrepreneur. I was not one of these, I sort of always knew from like high school, even college, like I'll probably start my own thing, do my own consulting throughout school. Back many years ago now, but I also did not want to jump right out of school right into being a founder. I actually very much buck that kind of thinking. Always felt like I want to do a good, solid number of years building a network, learning from other people that have done this well, having mentors in the space, being part of a team before I have the hubris to think that I could run my own show and do so with scale and do so with success. So that was always out there. And then from the personal side, around 2010, early 2011, I started the company in early 2011. I went through a lot of personal change in my own life. I don't know how you have found it, but I have sometimes found like when one major thing changes in your personal life, it tends to sort of ripple out throughout all aspects of your life. Some personal changes in my life really rippled out into work, where it made me think differently about everything. Where do I want to live 2 years from now? To what is this moment? I've been out in the workspace. Like I eventually wanted to start my own company. I've been out working for other people now at this point for 7-8 years. Entrepreneurship, I am told, does not get easier as you get older and you reach a certain point in life. So when is the moment to do that? So I think that company I was working with at the time, I think it became very clear this was the point that relationship is not what I needed. It's not that founder needed in a lieutenant. So from a personal side, what do I want to achieve just professionally in my life starting a business? It was a serendipitous moment. I think one of the reasons I thought that was a good moment, one of the reasons the company that I started was 10up, and the company that 10up had become was because from a skills point of view, in addition to like getting experience doing sales and sort of understanding how to operate, look at a P&L and run a business, I'd also spent the last few years really trying to help that company diversify from being a web shop that was very focused on a specific platform built on Cold Fusion at the time, a very specific partnership, and help that company break away from that in this era in 2007, 2008, 2009, when you started to see the emergence of these dominant content management platforms like Drupal at the time, platforms like WordPress. You start going outside of open source and you get into like Kinetic and some of these other software solutions. And one of the things that I witnessed happening while helping that company diversify, get into more platforms, experimenting with a number of platforms, one of the things I found was that I thought WordPress was a platform that was quickly growing up, quickly impressing me. I used it for the first time, I think, back in 2006. It was kind of like, it's an okay blogging piece of software, not much more than that. But as I started to use it circa 2008 and 2009, I actually found that there was a very rich ecosystem and community of integrations, people excited about the software. There was energy around it. It was quickly and intelligently iterating its user interface, its experience. It was very quickly becoming, in every technical respect, a full-featured CMS, but one that, unlike many of its competitors at the time, particularly competitors that were open source and weren't beholden to massive licensing fees and high gatekeepers in the space, that it was actually a very good user experience. It's actually a very good UI for open source software. It was a shockingly good experience for Joe junior developer or site owner that just wants to publish some stories, edit some pages, manage some content. So I thought that platform was on a rocket ship. It wasn't there yet in 2008, but I saw it going on this trend line where the developer energy is there, the consumer or business buyer energy was there for the platform. It was starting to get up. People were starting to ask questions more regularly in the enterprise space with some very large customers that were showing interest in the platform at that company. And I thought there was a huge opportunity there. I'd watched open source projects that range from like Red Hat and Linux to Drupal. There was this trajectory of these open source ecosystems that had very low barriers to entry, right? No licensing fees, anything else, started to get a lot of energy and community enthusiasm around them. And then one of the things that emerged in using those two pieces of software as an example is that you had the rise of the services businesses that supported them as integrators. And in both of those cases at that time, the dynamics have changed again in the last 12 years or 13 years, is both of those spaces, and they're not the only ones, other software solution spaces as well, very quickly established agencies of record effectively, right? A agency or maybe or company or maybe a handful of companies that quickly became known as the companies that you probably are going to be on your shortlist if you're researching who's the best team to make this to bring the software to life for me. So what I saw was increasing interest 2009, 2010 and capability of the software in very large buyers with big budgets, mostly in media at the time, but starting to break out into other large business spaces, particularly for like newsrooms and certain kind of features. A lot of interest growing quickly, a maturing in Automatic and WordPress VIP and some of the platform companies, a growing, maturing set of platform infrastructure offerings that needed partners that were very compelling in the space to provide, not just a downloadable piece of open source software, but a whole, infrastructure and ecosystem around them. And there wasn't really any agency of record. There were a couple 10, 12 person agencies that if you were really inside baseball, you would know were kind of the ones doing the cutting edge. But I thought that rocket ship was going to keep going up. I thought there was a huge opportunity for early entrants to come in, put in the work to establish themselves as the sort of dominant agency, the professional service provider, the integrator, pick your phrase, to come in and really solidify them in the space, both through technical excellence, through customer service excellence, also building on WordPress's strengths, a UI user experience for the content creators, not just people looking at your site, people have to manage your site. And I guess the short version is, so I thought the time was right. There was an opening for someone to come in and really focus starting on that space. It was a right time in my life personally to make a transition I wanted to make into starting a business and founding a business. Sort of the stars aligned. And that's how, I guess, my attempt at a short version of how it came to be in early 2011.
It's a really interesting story, and you have been very successful in positioning yourself in the marketplace. Now, 10up, how does it differentiate itself from other competitors? What is unique about you and your company?
Yeah, an excellent question. I think, and it's if I sound like I'm hesitating on an answer, it's not because I don't have an opinion about it, but it's at this time when we're doing this integration, we're sort of changing our sense of what is our position in the market, what makes us different. So I feel like I'm in this sort of limbo space of speaking to where 10up really has been compared to what it's about to be in this larger context. So I'm going to speak more to without revealing what our sort of new brand propositions are going to be, what our new strategy is going to be, speak a little bit in terms of the past, a little bit of over the last 13 years before the company did this integration and merger, what I think differentiated us. And I think there's a number of things. I think for one thing, we are unabashed in the customer service experience that we want to give to people and our craftsmanship. I think, probably every service company says we have the best service, we have the best craftsmanship. I think there's a few other things that made us stand out from the crowd that's maybe a little bit different than our competitors. First of all, I think particularly, so starting in the first, say, 7 or 8 years, we then diversified some of our platforms. But for an integrator very specifically focused on being the best in that ecosystem, the best in that pond for WordPress and open source CMSs, we built a full range of capabilities to kind of service every aspect of the customer's needs. So to put it a little bit simplistically, I think if you're specifically looking at that space, specifically looking at, I know that I might want to use this platform or do want to use this platform and I need to find the best service provider, that we had the ability to talk about AWS certified cloud experts, and Azure experts, people that in-house that understood how the infrastructure works. If they didn't want to be on one of our partner hosts, or if they wanted somebody that they knew could talk the talk with those partner hosts, if they had an issue, we have publisher revenue strategy experts, people that know how to optimize the ad stack, how to maximize your revenue from audience. We have an entire SEO and analytics team for measurement. I could go on and on. But the point being, I think we were uniquely in that space able to tell a story of, even if you're just coming to us for design or for engineering or implementation of your website, that you knew you had these capabilities and the presence of mind of those capabilities in a partner. A couple other things that made us different is there's a very compelling story, I think, both for our talent and for customers in the market about the way we contribute to these platforms. One of the things I am very passionate about, one of the things that was built into 10up's DNA, one of the reasons I was excited about WordPress as a platform is that I cherish an open web. I think it would be a very sad internet if the internet was entirely, say, pick on anybody here, it's a nice platform, but Adobe AEM and huge licensing fees. I don't want to see an internet that's all built on closed proprietary software that requires you to get gatekeeping certifications to be able to actually work on the software, that requires you to pay large exorbitant licensing fees to even have the right to develop on the platform, to get customers on board. I want an open, rich web. That's how the web was built. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Linux, these were all open technologies, and the web flourished on the openness, approachability, freedoms imbued in these technologies. So choosing WordPress as an open source platform that, imbues all those freedoms was in part related to my sense, my values. It also gave us a mechanism to stand out by being major contributors, giving back to those ecosystems. So 10up today, there's 15 different ways you can measure it, but I would argue on all the meaningful metrics, after Automatic, the founder of WordPress, Matt Mullenweg's company, after Automatic, we are the biggest contributor to that platform. So we help make the software. We have dozens, might be understating it now, of contributions, code commits to every version. We've got probably 24, maybe 36 people at this company that have contributed to those products. We also give away. We have a number of solutions. I'm sure we'll talk about some of them later. Things like Classifier, an AI integration solution for WordPress, Distributor, which solves a very hard problem of sharing content between multiple sites across the web and replicating content. We have a number of really first-class solutions that I think different companies might keep internally, might try to pay me $100 a month and license it out, might only have for themselves to when pitching a customer, say we have this technology nobody else has. That's very antithetical to the way that we think about the space. So we have open sourced all of those products. Anybody can download and use them. We can still tell a story about the innovation that we're driving using these solutions. But I think that story of, here are all these solutions we've made that solve hard problems. You can look at the code. We've given them back. We understand this platform better than anyone. Here's the proof in the pudding. I think has been a pretty powerful differentiator for us in the space.
It's really interesting that you decided to go with that philosophy of being open source and not being guarded about the solutions that you provide. Why did you take that particular approach? As you said, it does seem kind of antithetical to your regular business to follow that path.
Yeah, I think, there's, I'm trying to think how to be concise about it. There's not really one reason, as I said. It's a constellation of reasons. So one reason is it is values driven. It is, trying to think how to say this morning. So for one thing, when I think about what I want to achieve, why I started the business beyond just making money, right, and financial success within the space, the reason I chose the space, the reason I got into the web, the reason I got into the internet, other than just being a little bit nerdy, I was actually interested in journalism before I was interested in technology. And the link there is mass communication. the precarious link that I guess I'm trying to make here is I find immense joy in knowing that thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of people are using, in some tiny way, impacted by something we made. Now, there's multiple ways that can happen. We work on whitehouse.gov as a project. You get the fulfillment of knowing that probably hundreds of millions of people at some point are looking at your work that you touched. I think the plug-in open source solutions thing is similar. I'm in some ways more fulfilled. I want to be financially successful. I have the ability to do this. But in some ways, I am more fulfilled knowing that hundreds of thousands of people, in many cases, sometimes millions of people, for some of the solutions we built, are using something we built, that it's making, in some small way, their internet experience, their website management experience, their lives, to be melodramatic about it, a little bit better because of the work that we did. So some of it is just reach, wanting that kind of impact, wanting that kind of, to leave that kind of mark on the space. But it's also good business. It's good business for a number of reasons. So I know we're talking about the client side and the customer side. Again, there's something powerful about going into a client meeting or pitch meeting and say, oh, you're trying to figure out AI. You're trying to figure out this hard problem of how you've got 7 sites and you need to share some content between them, or you need to share news between them. We've got a solution. And hey, even if you don't want to work with us to do the work, here's a solution we made that we put out there. It's a very powerful statement, I think, to those customers about our innovation, our creativity, our sense of service. It's not just pay me $100 a month and you can use a solution, but here's something that we gave back. It makes you want to pick us as a customer. That's the client side, but I also think one of the most powerful impacts is actually on in the employment side of it. And I mean that there's a few different ways to look at that. One way to look at that is one very meta-philosophical question I think any business has to ask, especially when you're competing for precious talent in a space, is if you're not, Apple or Google, and you can't just give them bags of money to work at your company, why should they choose your company? Why do they want to work at your company other than it was conveniently the nearest paycheck they could find, which is not a very durable proposition to build employment on in the long term, especially again, if I don't have the bags of money some other larger companies had. So I think building on having a sense of values, a sense of purpose, that as we give back to this open internet, this is our social good. These are our values. We contribute. You get to make something, and we're not just going to be rubbing our hands together saying we can sell this to 50 other customers, that we're also going to give some of those things back. We're going to put those out there in the space. We're going to give back to this larger open web, I think is a powerful social good, is a powerful cultural identifier, a powerful differentiator for employees in a world where, again, I just don't want to I don't want my only value proposition to be, you happen to know this technology we use, and again, with the closest, best paycheck you can find. It also, so we're trying to attract great developers and great strategists and problem solvers in the space. If you're researching, say, AI integrations for WordPress, and you're really curious as an engineer, not a business buyer, you stumble upon, here is this free solution. You can look at how he built it. You can look at the code. You'll find it on GitHub as a platform. There's a very direct employment inducement. We'll literally put on all of our GitHub pages at the bottom, you want to build things like this, you want to make this kind of impact, come work for us. So I apologize for that was a little bit of a rambling answer, but I think maybe the short summation of it is, business for me is not just about financial. It is about values and doing something that makes me feel fulfilled. There's that aspect to it personally as a founder. It is good client business because it shows innovation, it shows creativity, it creates a reason to pick us that is almost adjacent to doing the right thing and picking a company that's giving back to the space that you're taking from. And for employees and finding talent, it gives them a reason to pick the company, to care about what we do. It gives them a reason to care about our purpose, and literally just helps us find talent that stumbles upon these code, these repositories and these solutions out in the web.
So we've talked a bit about the history. We've talked about the modern state. Looking forwards, and you mentioned AI a couple of times there, and so I always jump on this question. So what kind of tech trends do you see in the industry? Are there any exciting ones that you're looking forward to in the future?
Is it possible to be excited but not necessarily look forward to it?
You can choose either or both. It's up to you.
It's at the risk of sounding like a cliche. Of course, it's hard not to feel like AI is the elephant in the room that could change everything. Maybe I'll defend myself here by saying I'm not a jump on the latest, hottest, sexiest tech of the day bandwagon. I will confess, I never got on the blockchain bandwagon. If you had asked me about that, that was the hot next thing 2 years ago, I would have told you pass. if a client wants us to do something, we have that capability, but I just don't see it as, I see it as a trend at the moment, or, what do they say, a solution looking for a problem or something. So I'm not just the latest tech hype guy, but I am hyped about AI. I do think this is transformative. I do think this is a change agent. This is website circa 1994. It's not really quite what you want it to be transformative yet, but you can very much see how it's on the path to completely changing everything in the future. So that's, I think, number one. I think I'm excited about it in the sense that there's lots of interesting opportunity. We've done interesting projects in the space. We're doing interesting R&D in the space. It's hard some days, if we're being vulnerable here, not to feel existentially threatened in terms of the future by what this technology means to our industry some days. But I can maybe tell myself that feels far enough away that it's in the exciting stage, not the existential dread stage of the technology. Other trends, these are much more small bore kind of trends, specifically in the space of CMS and web technologies. I am delighted to see a trend, admittedly, I think because of economic pressures that are less fortunate. I am very excited to see a trend where big media, big publishers, big companies that are telling stories on the web and in newsrooms are moving away, are now fully moving away from the delusion that they should build their own in-house custom platforms. So there's been a steady trickle. I can't talk about all of them. Some of them are customers we're working with that have not made this public. There are ones that are public, like I think good examples being like Box moving completely off of their own in-house CMS onto WordPress as a platform. It's not just WordPress, but we're seeing if 2012 to 2019 was this era of we can be media and content creators can be technology businesses, hire big engineering teams and reinvent the wheel of CMS and content publishing. And I think we have, which I don't think is a particularly good use of capital or energy, solving the same problems over and over again in the space. We've kind of moved beyond those. There's a clear trend, again, probably because of financial pressures, probably because things like AI feel hard to keep up with if you're going on your own. There's a clear trend going on of moving to standardized platforms. That is a more exciting trend for me from just a pure business point of view. I think it's good for the web. I hate to see us spending time with engineers solving the same problem 17 different ways, back to that open source ethos. But it's also good, I think, good for our business, because I think companies like us can more effectively help customers solve those problems if they're not, deluding themselves into thinking we'll get 20x multipliers because we have some specially differentiated technology. I think there are some sad trends going on in the space right now that are economic factors that have to do in the US, at least, with things like interest rates being up, which pains me to say it, but I see a trend toward more low-cost labor happening in the market. I think I see incredible price pressure in the space that is, in one sense, forcing creativity that will help, product businesses and businesses out in the real world more cost effectively do digital experience. I think that will ebb and flow as, with the market. But yeah, AI is the big one in the room.
It's unfortunate. I mean, it's good that you answered. There's some concerns and there's some really positive attributes to that. And I think from an existential kind of threat kind of thing, I think there are so many areas where this could apply to. So I don't think you're alone in showing that particular vision of the future. Terminator-esque, some might say, but we're yet to see that one in action. Just before we go, unfortunately, we are running out of time, but just before we do, could you just give us some advice for those people who are entrepreneurs, maybe in the early stages, or who want to be an entrepreneur themselves, having gone through what you've been through? What would be the best advice to give someone like that?
My stock advice, for want of time, I alluded to this when I talked about my own journey. Keep that entrepreneurial gene, but don't skip steps. I strongly suggest anybody that wants to at some point start their own business, find a business you're excited about, find a mentor you're excited about, spend a few minutes learning from the inside before you feel like you have to start your own thing. I don't think there's a version where people can look at 10up and look at the 10up story and are like, you started your first business and there's some magic gene that I must have that let me in my first business become as successful as it was, build a $40+ million engine. The truth is that I don't think that ever would have happened if not for those 7-8 years that I spent learning from other people, getting to make mistakes on somebody else's dime, in some case, having mentors tell me that I'm full of crap in some cases, and get my head screwed on the right way, and from everything from how to think about sales to how to think about personnel challenges. So I guess short version is my number one advice is if you have not spent time working in something adjacent to your space, whether that's tech or whatever industry you're in, do a little time, put a little bit of work in, working for somebody else, keep your ideas, keep your hunger. Don't wait 30 years, find a reasonable amount of time to then jump out and start your own thing, but do some time learning before you dive in head first.
Perfect, lovely. That's great advice. And Jake, I just want to thank you again so much for taking time to talk with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
That was Jake Goldman, founder of 10up and partner at 10up Plus Fueled.